Hi everyone, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. If you're watching it on the internet or listening to a podcast version of the show, make sure to subscribe so that you get notified when a new show is released. And if you'd like to find links to videos or MP3 files, just go to miamighostchronicles.com, and you can also submit any eerie experiences you've had at the Submit Your Story tab. Also, hook up with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, where you can find information not only about new shows, but also about monthly free merchandise giveaways. So get comfortable, enjoy this new episode, and just imagine it's a dark and stormy night where not a creature is stirring, not even a mouse. And if a creature is stirring, you hope it's a mouse.
Hi everybody, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How is everybody doing today? Good, I hope. I know you're going to be watching this a little bit later, but anyway, I want to wish everybody again a happy 2019. We're now here into January. A lot of exciting things happening, and I'm going to rub it in. Living in South Florida. As a matter of fact, I was talking to the guest I'm going to bring on in a minute that he lives up in the Northeast, how much different it is as far as this time of year that they're having a pretty crazy snowy weather. And down here it's coming down into the 50s. And like I tell everybody, it's like, oh, it's so cold. Believe it or not, I've even put out my fireplace. And I imagine people up in the northern states must be thinking, she's crazy. But, you know, that's a South Florida. That's a Miami thing. We use any excuse to say that it's really cold. But anyway, let me go ahead and tell you about a great guest that I've got on tonight. Okay, like I promised you guys, 2019, I was going to bring a lot of interesting people on. And here we go. We're kicking off the year the right way. And the gentleman I have on is Mr. Ron Yacovetti. Now, Ron, since a very early age, he's been fascinated with the idea, and I love the possibilities of this paranormal. Okay, and I like the possibility because it leaves you with an open-ended thing. Now he's originally from New Jersey, and he resides there with his son. And he began investigating during about 14 years that he was living in Los Angeles. And so he's gone to a lot of the famous locations that are haunted, such as the Queen Mary in Long Beach, the Oman House that belongs to David Oman on Cielo Drive, the Glen Tavern Inn. And he's got a unique background as a stand-up comedian. And he's also worked in the mixed martial arts, the MMA, as he does commentary for them. And now he's in the paranormal. But I know eventually we're going to ask him about all these things, but I'm going to ask Ron what I ask all my guests, which is, let's bring him on first of all. But anyway, Ron, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and start off the year.
Yes.
It begins painful a little bit when I hear about your weather going down to the 50s.
Yes.
Where for us, if it goes up to the 50s, it's a win.
Exactly.
And like you said, I lived in Los Angeles for 14 years, so
okay.
Every time I'm shoveling snow, I have to remind myself that it's better than an earthquake or an entire neighborhood in flames.
Yeah, I mean, either or, right? Like, if I had to pick, okay. But anyway, my son was out in San Diego for a while, and I took a few trips out there, and I know what the kind of weather that you're talking about. Matter of fact, it's a lot drier than it is here. It's a different type of heat, but it's very nice out there. But yeah, I know what you mean as far as the weather being totally different from where you're at right now. But anyway, Ron, let me ask you what I ask all my guests is, how did you get involved in the paranormal? Did you have an experience as a kid or what?
So, since I was little, I was always fascinated with it. And, you know, back in the day, it was a little segment on Unsolved Mysteries or you know, a random show where you would get a segment that had to do with ghosts or the paranormal, or you didn't really have the multitude of shows that we have on TV now. So it was a treat, like Saturday morning cartoons, to have something to watch. So every time I would just grasp it, I was like, oh, this is good. I just really found that whole idea interesting about the soul and the afterlife and the whole thing. Flash forward, I got started because when I used to live in Los Angeles, I was at the time dating somebody, and we could not I don't care how many channels my cable provider offered. We couldn't agree on one thing, not one show, until we got to Ghost Adventures, and it was like, really, you want to watch that? And then we watched. And so the funny thing is that a lot of the episodes that particular, I think it was a couple seasons in,
Right.
They were locations that were close to where we lived, Southern California, that you could actually drive to. The Glen Tavern Inn, about an hour and a half away.
Okay.
The Queen Mary in Long Beach, which is one of my favorite places to go. You mentioned David Oman's house in Beverly Hills. I'm trying to remember the name of the place in downtown Los Angeles too. It was an old hotel inn. So there were just so many places, and so we're like, we looked it up. They do events. We started going. First time, nothing even really happened, but you get that on the edge of your seat feeling like at any moment something could.
Yes, exactly.
And you're hooked.
Uh-huh.
And so that's how it happened. But I do remember a couple things from when I was a kid that now, if I was of the same mindset then,
Yes.
I might have questioned. Like, my father's a musician, he was a drummer. And there were instances when he would be out playing a gig that night, and my sister and I were in our bedrooms on the top floor of the house, on the second floor, and then in the bottom floor below the main level, the basement, where he had a drum room that was pretty much soundproofed. So he could play at night, not disturb the neighbors.
Okay.
And I would hear the drums from the basement upstairs, and at the time it didn't even occur to me. I kind of just blew it off, rolled over, went to sleep.
Right.
Which proves that when we're small, we think we know everything, but we're idiots. But
of course.
that's something that I remember. Like, that's kind of an odd, unexplained thing.
Right.
If I was in that situation now, I would question, and I'd probably run at it with a digital recorder and some kind of a camera.
Exactly. And I had a couple of experiences when I was like teenager, but like you said, when you're you're just, that's weird. Okay, next. So I know exactly, but now when I look back, when I think about it, it's like, that was an experience. That was a weird experience that you had there.
Yeah.
And I tell everybody at one time, we used to live across the street from my grandmother, and my mom, she would always tell me because she would leave really early to go to work, and she says, if you ever decide to stay home, you need to call your grandmother and tell her that you're home. And one day I wasn't really sick. I was just didn't want to go to school. So I stayed in bed, and I had gone into my mom's bedroom, and when you're kind of like waking up because I hear somebody making noises in the kitchen. Like when people are going through cupboards or moving stuff around. No clanging of pots, but when somebody's, as a matter of fact, I'm thinking to myself, my grandmother's in the kitchen, which, by the way, my grandmother would never have gone. She had really bad knees. Plus, even though she had a key to the house, she would never have come over for anything. She never did. If she wanted anything, she would ask them, bring it to me. But that's what came to my mind was like, oh, my grandmother's in the kitchen. She sounds like she's looking for something, but that's what it sounded like. When people are opening cupboards and then it was one of those houses with the raised wooden floors that when somebody walks, you can hear them. Mm-hmm. My mom's bedroom was at the end of the hallway, like down from the kitchen. And all of a sudden, I hear footsteps coming down the hallway. And I'm thinking, I'm going to pretend I'm asleep because I know my grandmother is going to scold me for why didn't I call. First of all, why didn't I go to school? And then number two, why didn't I call her? So I went over and I turned over and I pretended I was asleep, like with my back to the door. And I remember I felt somebody come to the room of the door, look at me. And it's really funny because my grandmother was a really short lady. And I don't know how to explain it, but I felt like the person that was staring me at was taller, but okay, but still. And I felt somebody come and pull the blanket over my shoulder. And by the way, I'm still pretending I'm asleep because my grandmother, she was hardcore, okay? So anyway, I stayed home. My mom, she got home from work later in the afternoon. She would normally go over to my grandmother's house like right after she got home. 5 minutes after she goes over there, the phone rings. And I answer. My mom's like, why didn't you tell your grandmother that you were at home? And I'm like, but she knew. No, she doesn't. What do you mean she knew? She knew. She was here this morning. She even came to the bedroom and covered me. And I'm hearing my grandmother in the background going, what is she saying? I wasn't there. in other words, my grandmother would not have, thinking about
Yeah.
it, my grandmother would have woken me up and said, "Why are you here?" And much less would she have lied about, not coming into the room. And back then, I was like,
Yeah.
okay, but what? And that was it. But if, like you said, if that would happen to me now, I'd be like, hey,
So it's kind of like, I mean, first of all, it was very the occult was a lot more taboo, and
Yes.
you couldn't explain you had an experience without expecting to be judged as being crazy.
yes,
For one, and for two, the other thing too is that it's kind of like you never had a blue car before. You get a blue car, suddenly everywhere you go, you see blue cars, right?
exactly.
So the other side of that is that people now think, because people who do what we do are so of that mindset, that when something falls over at the house, when something flickers, we
Yes.
go, oh, ghost. And the truth is, a lot of times, as you know, there's rational explanation behind it. It's not anything paranormal.
Of course not.
But it could be, and sometimes it is.
Yeah.
And then you become enlightened to that. And that's where I think this field, it requires some level of self-respect and discipline. Because you have to discern between the rational explanation side or the supernatural side, and at the same time, you have to be open to both possibilities until you're conclusively able to lean on one side or the other. And I think one of the things that we do as a community to hurt ourselves is that we step to other people's evidence, we step to other people's findings or what they do with a level of certainty about they're faking it or it's not legit that we really can't substantiate. We really can't back it up. But we go, that's fake. They make that stuff up. It's all embellished.
Exactly.
Maybe it is. And I'm not saying people don't hoax or make things up. What I'm saying is that 90-something% of the time when people speak to that, they can't back it up and substantiate it. And if you had a loved one getting convicted and going sent to jail with that same level of proof, you would be like, well, they didn't prove anything.
Exactly.
So
And you know
I
what?
think it's just
A
it's
lot
bad
of
for
people,
climate.
a lot of people sometimes have experiences and they're not prepared to capture it, because
Yeah.
that's not like I tell everybody, the supernatural is not an on-demand thing.
No.
And it's almost, I want to say sometimes it almost catches you unaware, whether you're not prepared or something like that. But it's true. And okay, so I don't have a picture, I don't have a recording, I got my word. That's the best I can do.
And that's the thing that makes other people uncomfortable.
Yes.
Is that in order for them to say, you're hoaxing it, you're a fake, and you
Yes.
go, well, I have a picture or I experienced this or whatever, why would I make it up? The only recourse they have, because they can't really prove that you're making it up, the only recourse they have is to call you being full of caca.
Of course.
And if they know you, most of the time, they're not comfortable or confident enough or even cowardly to do that.
Well, and this is, and I tell everybody this because I've been doing this for a really, really long time. And I tell them, I'm one of the most skeptical persons as far as my standards.
Sure.
Of what I everybody thinks, oh, you'll believe anything. And it's like, no, I won't. You'd be
That's a
surprised.
misconception about people who do ghost hunting.
Yeah.
That if you do it, you believe everything is paranormal. And it's
Right.
not. It's anything but.
And I've had people bring me stuff. Sometimes it's questionable that I'll say
Sure.
it could be, but it could not be, and I'm going to reserve judgment on it. I'm not going to say
Yeah.
out and out, but and I'm going to give you a perfect example. And I'm sure you've seen some of these wrong pictures of things at the window. Oh, it's a face, and I'm like looking at it, and I'm like, it is where It's like, I'm sorry. Sometimes they try to make things out of what's not there.
Right. Matrixing or pareidolia, where your brain completes
Exactly.
the puzzle, or your ear you finish it. Right, and it does happen. That's the
Yes.
thing that gets confusing is that there are people who misinterpret or make mistakes, self-included. We all do it. There are people who may embellish or hoax things. Those things
Yes.
happen. But when we attack each other without certainty or the ability to substantiate it about evidence and how people do stuff, what happens
yes.
is that we're pooping where we eat. We're contaminating
Yes.
the same pool that we exist in, because then we're giving the perception to the outside that there is so many people hoaxing and faking it in this community,
Right. Well,
beyond the numbers that actually exist.
and I hate to say it, there's some people in there, I'm not going to say everybody, but some people, it's like, I want to own it. So I want to own the real stuff, and everybody else is making it up. I've got the real
Yeah.
experience. I've captured the real evidence, and everybody else, if they didn't follow, for example, my standards and methods. Because I tell everybody, I've been doing this since the '90s, before there was even digital photography, when you had to develop film, which
Yeah.
cost a lot of money. Okay, before any of these equipments that they have, or the FLIRs and the
Yeah.
Ovilus and all these other things. Okay, um, let me tell you, it's some people. Sometimes absolutely it's a question of good timing. Other people, if they have access to certain locations,
Right.
like tour guides, docents, that they go to a place all the time, and it's inevitable that they're just there at the right time. And then there's other
Hmm.
people that go there, like you said, you go once to some place and you have it. It happens. And then
Yeah.
there's other people that go and they'll go and they'll go and they'll go, man, I never see anything. I go, does that mean there's nothing there though? And then there's the people that they want to have what they captured or what they saw or what I'm the legit, and they try to legitimize themselves by making everybody else look fake. And I've seen
Yeah.
that before. I've seen
Yeah,
that
and
before.
that's what I'm speaking to, and it's sad because you, it's like the person who's most paranoid about getting stolen from is a thief, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So they don't realize that they're contaminating the same community that they're a part of by doing that. I look at everybody's stuff, and I understand if something's more or less compelling. If I'm able to explain it, so be it. But I really, really try not in any circumstance, especially in a critical way, to speak beyond the level of certainty that I can substantiate.
Yeah.
So I love quoting some of the brilliant people that I've had a chance to work with. There's a gentleman named Matthew Schultz who runs the paranormal investigations on the Queen Mary in Long Beach, California.
Okay.
And he always says that the most predictable thing in the paranormal is that it's unpredictable.
Yes. Yes.
And so that speaks to what you were saying, is that I've done countless hours on that ship. It's one of my favorite places to go. I've got videos and audios and photos and stuff from I've probably done more hours on that ship than some people have done in various locations combined.
Right.
Got one super really good picture of a shadow figure in one of the lower parts of the ship.
Oh, really?
That had gotten published in a book. To this day, it creeps me out when I look at it. That's one time after all those hours. And I didn't even know. It was an empty doorway. I was taking pictures of the boiler room that we're heading into. And then 5 or 6 hours later, I'm looking at photos on my old phone, and then boom, there this thing is. I'll send it to you. It's still to this day creeps me out, because I know I could see that doorway. And if somebody was there, I would not have taken a picture, and I would have seen them.
You know what? And that's the thing. And sometimes you're prepared, and you're there at the right time, and you
Right.
capture, and it's like, wow. I mean, that other picture, the one that this lady caught in the '90s, I don't remember her name, the one on Bachelor's Grove in the Chicago cemetery.
Ah, yeah. Somebody just brought that up the other day to me too. Yeah, I know that there was a lot of effort to try to even explain that away like that, and they have not been able to debunk that photo.
No, they have not. They have
Especially
not.
because it speaks to the time frame you were talking about, when there was no Photoshop and the way that it was taken. They looked at the photo negative, and you can tell
Yes.
beyond a doubt if a photo negative from that point in time was doctored at all, and it wasn't. There was no tampering on that
So
thing
anyway,
at all.
Ron, as far as capturing evidence, I absolutely agree that some's legit, some's not legit. Some, and I hate to say it, sometimes the best evidence, people want to disprove it because it's almost like, man, that's a really good picture.
Yeah.
It's like, so you get swamped with a lot of criticism. And I tell everybody, once you've had that firsthand experience, whether you capture evidence or not, when
Right.
you have that reality shift, that in other words, not like we were talking about, like when you were a kid and later on you realize, oh, that was weird. I mean, right in that moment, you have that experience and you go, you know what? You go through a checklist of possibilities and you know it's not that. There's a shift in your reality that it's like, if nobody ever believes this, and I can never make anybody believe me, I know what I witnessed or what I experienced.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that
Something you
changes.
learn early on when you start doing this paranormal stuff, because you get excited when you get your first EVP or you get your first maybe that's an apparition in a window, whatever.
Yes.
You get excited to share it with anybody. You're at the checkout at the supermarket, going, "Look at it! You see this? That's a ghost." And they're like, paper or plastic. And I'm like, look. But you learn early on that the last thing you want to do in this field is try to convince people of something that they already don't believe.
Yes.
I have friends and people who know that I do what I do. Some of them believe in all the stuff that has to do with supernatural or ghosts or whatever. Some people open, and some people think, a better chance that the Lucky Charms guy is going to ride in here on a unicorn and serve me cereal than a full body apparition. And I don't try to convince any of those people. Here's another quote from another brilliant guy. The late psychic Peter James would say, and I'm almost exact on the quote, I could be off slightly, is he would say, for the believer, no evidence is necessary. For the skeptic, no evidence will do.
Exactly. You're right.
And so that's my position with this stuff at all times, too. I know the community or the people that I can share stuff with and who will give me a second opinion. And sometimes I will seek that, too, because I know that I can be wrong.
In my experience, the really hardcore skeptics, and by this I don't mean there's skeptics that are like skeptics, but they're but I'm talking. I say those are the people that are most thirsty to be disproven, even though you might think they don't. They're almost afraid.
So there's a couple of people around the Northeast who are known for that, and my personal opinion, and I will own this. The problem to me with that is that if I went into a situation, I told you I'm going to investigate 12 places in the next couple weeks. They're all haunted.
Right.
They're all going to be having ghosts. I'm going to get all EVPs. I'm going to get all ghost box stuff. Every place is going to produce results. They're all haunted. I'm going to have evidence of everything because I believe that they're all. You would think, well, no, you can't go in with a bias. You have to go into that location and let it speak to you, and then assess the evidence you get. You could go to a place, get nothing. I could go to a place, get nothing. You can go back and get something. So you have to assess in each situation, right? But there are people whose agenda on the critical side is the polar opposite of going in believing everything's a ghost. And for some reason, those people can often fly under the radar because they're trying to prove something.
Yes.
It's not, you can't go in with a bias. You're just as closed-minded to the other side of you being wrong. So to me, you already enter the equation 50% wrong. Yes. If you go in, everything's bullshit and I'm going to prove it. You can't.
And you know what? One of the things I've learned, especially when we're talking historical landmarks or places that have a certain ghost, I'm very big into research. And a lot of times I find that either it's exaggerated, inaccurate, or an out-and-out lie. But at the same time, you find out, or sometimes it's true, but sometimes you get details that are much more disturbing than the actual truth about other people, things. And I say, and you know what? A lot of things, especially when we're talking a little way back, a lot of things, dark deeds took place as far as that could generate an intelligent haunting that never made the papers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You could have a haunting. It might not be the daughter of the house. Maybe it was a servant girl.
Absolutely.
That got killed and buried in the backyard, and nobody knows. And then they said, "Oh, she ran away. She left the employee." I mean, there's a lot of things back then that. Exactly like what you said, that sometimes you have to go in not thinking, oh, it's absolutely going to be this entity or this communication with this ghost that's supposed to be the one there. You'd be surprised. And that's why sometimes people get evidence and they can't make head or tails. It doesn't fit into the story about this place.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. There's people who go to the, David Omen's house in Beverly Hills, the Cielo Drive, where the Manson Tate murders had happened.
Yes.
And one time I think he investigated that house 7 or 8 times. He's a great guy, by the way. He's always treated me really well. He makes food for his guests. He gives you the history of the house.
I've interviewed Dave. Dave. He's hysterical. Yeah.
Yeah, he's always been good. When I go out to LA with my girlfriend in the last couple of years in November, he has us over for dinner. We either bring dinner or we bring dessert. And then he just lets us run amok in the house, no formal event. He just go. So we have the whole house to ourselves. And it is the Disneyland of the dead. That place, every single time, if there's any place that's been consistent, every time I've gone, something noteworthy happens, that's the place.
That's the place.
As much as I love the Queen Mary, that place has been very consistent. But only one time did the Manson or Tate mentions come up. And it was specifically because a year ago November, when Manson was on his deathbed, I was at David's house. We were in David's house.
Right.
And so for the first time, we asked a question that had to do with that situation.
Right.
But for all the other years I've gone there,
right,
I never tried to get Sharon, or I tried to get what was there. I tried to connect with what was there. And to speak to the other thing you were saying, right behind me, there's a window back here. Right across the river, which you can see is New York City. Mm-hmm. This is the Upper West Side. There's a place, Ghost Adventures went there, I think the season before Nick Groff left.
Okay.
Where they debuted the SLS Connect camera. Okay. It's called the Morris Jamel Mansion and Museum.
Absolutely.
I think the episode was called George Washington Ghost.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So at the Morris Jamel Mansion here, before the Jamel family had it, which, by the way, she has relics from Napoleon Bonaparte's estate in that place still. It had been like a tavern, and it had some of that seedy history that you were talking about, where prostitution and death and murder, tons of stuff could have happened that nobody would have been chronicling. It would have been written down anywhere.
Yeah.
So you don't just get Eliza Jamel in there. You could be getting who knows, because you don't know what's in there.
Because, of course, she was connected to Aaron Burr and all this other stuff. Yes. And, Hans Holzer, he did a story back when the children saw her supposedly on the balcony, shushing them or something like that. Yeah, but like you said, there's probably, even though she didn't sound like she was a nice lady, I really haven't, but there's probably a whole cast of 1,000 that could be more likely haunting the place than her, based on what you said.
Oh yeah, for sure. That said, though, and this is kind of an interesting story since you wanted a personal experiencing. Yes. So we were there over the summer. Our friend Vinny Carbone ran the ghost hunts there, and so we had a couple of guys and a couple of girls, and supposedly on the second floor where Eliza Jamel's bedroom is, they say that she doesn't like when there's men in there. They'll get more activity on any sessions when they do it with just women. Okay. So we were running Echovox on a tablet through a Bluetooth speaker across the room. It was 3 or 4 of the women with us in the room doing the session, and then myself, Vincent, and another gentleman named Dennis went upstairs, and we did something separately. While the girls were in there, during the session, they were asking questions, something like that, and then an entire curtain rod over one of the windows just collapsed and came slamming down, and then they heard a female's voice laugh through the speaker with the Echovox. And they were a little bit freaked out, let me say, to the least. Yeah.
See, that's the kind of stuff that it's like, do I really want to stay here? Okay. And I tell everybody, even when you do paranormal research, there's a lot of times where you how can I say it? That's what you're there for. You're trying to catch it. But it doesn't stop you from going, huh? And wanting to bolt out the door.
Of course, not everybody who does this probably has some moment when they've had the caca scared out of them. And I say caca, and I mean that wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
It happens to us. One of the most unnerving feelings I've ever had in probably 6 or 7 years about or around a location was early on, then eventually it subsided, was the Hinsdale house in Hinsdale, New York, where I think a couple of shows, at least I think Paranormal Lockdown, Nick Groff went there.
Yes, yeah.
You feel it. You know what I'm talking about because you've been doing this long enough. You absolutely feel it. Every one of us, there were 5 of us, every one of us was having second thoughts about even staying there that night. There was an exorcism that was performed on the house or in the property. A lot of death happened outside the house. Okay. Eventually, we kind of get a little goofy and we were joking around, which I'm all for, because when you dealing with energy, like people say, don't be in a bad place because you attract, whatever kind of energy you got going on.
Right.
So to me, that's good. Laughing, joking around, positive energy, you're putting it out there. I think we broke our mood and we kind of lightened up a little bit because of that.
Yeah.
But we were all people were nauseous and dizzy and didn't want to stay. We're like, there's a Holiday Inn down the street. We were really having second thoughts about staying in there for the night on sleeping bags and cots and stuff because it really felt bad.
And one of the things that, especially houses like the Hinsdale, that you've got different type of, people conducting paranormal investigations.
Yep.
How can I say this? Not everybody is meant to do this. And some people have something walking with them. I don't care if you can't call yourself a paranormal investigator, that when they go to these places, they bring something with them. In other words, You get like an accumulation of energy that part of it is originally what's there, but part of it is something that comes with people that visit there.
That's brilliant, because that's one of the things that I don't remember who said it, but somebody offered that up as one of the reasons why that house is the way it is.
And it gets, you get like this supercharged, like a spiritual turbulence, like exactly like what you described, where everybody in the group is actually having physical symptoms of what people describe when you're feeling nervous or sick, nauseous, uneasy, like I want to leave. Yeah. Even though I'm sure you were probably all excited before, thinking that you were going to investigate this place. And then all you're thinking about is, how quick can I get out of here? Which is like your intuition telling you need to get out of here. And
So here's the crazy part about people who do what we do. We're going back.
Yes, go ahead.
We're going back in February, and I think we're going back, weather permitting, and I think we're going back again a couple months after that. As paranormal research goes, it is a fascinating location.
Right.
We did get evidence. We did have a couple things happen that were kind of bizarre.
Okay.
One of us had gotten affected again later on. But we're going back, and
Let me ask you.
What do they say?
Have you ever had anything follow you home?
Ha!
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever been more in sync on an interview when I've been interviewing on a show than with you. Like, you're stepping on the next thing that would follow up what actually had experience. I don't know, you're psychic or anything. Okay. But no, I'm serious. So I was going to say that the only time I've ever had any kind of negative anxiety or anything like that since I've been doing this was when I had an attachment problem one time when I lived in Los Angeles.
Oh. Let me hear
I don't know if it was something that followed me home.
Okay.
I don't know if it was something that manifested at the time. And I know the girl I used to date at the time had anger management problems, and I know the fact that I attributed this happening to her, she wasn't happy about. But
okay,
it is what it is.
When you say an attachment, what happened?
Okay, so I had a shaman get rid of it. I'll start at the end.
Okay.
It either manifested from the angst and anxiety and stuff that was happening between us, or it was with her and it jumped to me from the angst and anxiety, or it latched on at a location from the angst and anxiety.
Okay.
Those are the three possibilities they gave me. Weren't sure which.
Okay.
Said it was a dark energy or entity. It wasn't very powerful, but it was definitely dark, and it was definitely trying to mess with me. That's what she told me.
Non-human?
I don't think so. I don't believe that it was. I don't believe it was a human.
Non-human. So it was non-human.
Yeah, I believe it was non-human. Yeah.
Okay.
So she said it was around for like a month, but it took some time to build up enough energy or momentum.
Absolutely, and I'm
to rear its ugly head. And so, what happened was that at first I had a little heating dish that would motion sensitive for fire safety. You bump it and go, eh. I have another over here now, but different one. And so it was going off like a REM pod. It would just sound off, and I'm like, that's weird. And then one time I woke up and I had scratches in my beard here like this, and it was just like a shadowy beard like this. Right. And I had scratches. And now my son has a cat, but when she would stay over, or because she would stay over, a lot of times the cat wasn't allowed in the bedroom.
Okay. So
plus, it wasn't that kind of a deep scratch. I've gotten cat scratches before.
Right, exactly.
And certainly he wouldn't be on my face, because that would wake me up like that. So then it was that, and then I had a little concern. I was getting anxiety in the solar plexus in the middle of my chest, kind of, for no reason. Mm-hmm. And then what sealed the deal was when I had all that happening, I called the guy from the group that I was with called Para, P-A-R-A out there.
Okay.
And he checked with one of the shaman, and she said, yeah, what I told you was something dark, blah, 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 Mm-hmm. This is Thursday. Come in and see me on Saturday. I'll get rid of it. Okay. So on the Friday in between, my son's 4 or 5 years old, I forget at the time. I pick him up from his mom. And by the way, no drama there. She and I get along.
Right. That was just, regular stuff.
Yeah. Yep, we get along great even to this day. I pick him up, and I said, we're going to stop at the supermarket. I named like 5 items maybe, real quick. We're going to go home, we'll eat and watch TV, whatever. We get in the supermarket. 2 of the items that I talked about in the car flew off the shelf when I got to them in the supermarket.
Oh.
A package of American cheese, the Kraft like 12 singles or whatever it is, or something like that, popped out of the bin and landed on the floor.
That was
went up and out, and the other one was a loaf of bread from the second shelf from the top. It just slid out from the other loaf and hit the floor. That's generally not my shopping experience.
That was traveling with you. Wherever you went, there it was. It was like...
Yep. And so then the next day we got rid of it, and I felt the ease of the anxiety and the tension, and then nothing ever since. And then since then, I have another friend who's a shaman from that group her name is Pamela Dinkowitz. She's out there in LA or near LA.
Mm-hmm.
And she'll check in with me from time to time, and she tells me that I have spirit guide animals now that are protecting me, and I'm a lot more grounded. And
right.
So whatever that thing was, or whatever that situation was, at the time it wasn't a great story. Now it gives me a story to tell, and I think that thing was kind of like training camp for a fighter. I think that thing it toughened me up. It made me aware of not taking situations or those kind of possibilities lightly. And being prepared to deal with something like that if it happens. That is the only time since I've been doing this stuff.
Right.
I'm like everybody else who doesn't. I don't propose the idea of taunting. I'm not a proponent of that at all. But when I had that thing going on, I taunted it. I did. I sat in the car and I saged my car. It looked like a scene from a Cheech and Chong movie. Like up in smoke.
I know because
they're smoking pot in the car. So that's what it looked like. And I talked to it. I was like, don't get comfortable. Your ass is gone.
Yeah.
Because at that point, it's invading my space. It's invading my personal, my personal area. And so then that's where I draw the line to. I'm even with people, I'm very easygoing and non-confrontational. But that thing was here. And so.
Well, but I'm glad you mentioned something, because a lot of thanks to Hollywood. Thanks, Hollywood. Everybody thinks that when you get involved, something like, let's say an attachment, it's like 72 hours later, things are flying around in your house. And that's not the way it works. It's very slow, incremental stuff. Okay, sometimes it starts maybe with a nightmare or weird feelings or feeling anxiety or just uneasiness. It builds up. It might take weeks, months sometimes for it to get to the point that you realize, wow, something is going on. It depends also what kind of person you are, how in tune you are to yourself. Because if, let's say, you're a person that's got a lot of drama going on to begin with, as an example, this could go by for months before you realize, okay, there's something extra. I got somebody extra around with me. And like you said, it could have been, depending on how you felt, probably your intuition was going off like the alarm bells, which is sometimes the anxiety and stuff that you feel, trying to tell you something's going on.
Yeah.
Did you just don't pay attention? But that's good though, that you had access to a shaman that was able to dislodge it right away.
Yeah, there are two in the group that were both very, very good. The one, Phyllis Douglas, got rid of it for me, and the other one I mentioned, Pamela. I still chat with her. Matter of fact, and this connects the dots, and I'm all about dot connecting when I can. When we were in the SUV with 5 of us, it was me and 4 women. 5 of us went up to Hinsdale House a couple months back in November. Everybody was on their phone except the driver. Very important to point that out. I actually checked in and touched base with Pamela Dinkowitz, who's one of the shaman, who would still look out for me now. And that's when she was telling me about that I had a new spirit guide animal. It was a black panther.
Okay.
Because I wanted to cover all of my bases. Right. I knew about that house. I had heard from other people that I had worked with before. There's a group in North Jersey called Bearfort Paranormal. Robert and Sandra Bandoff, they're great people. They had been up there. He had scratches on his car, I think on the inside. He said another guy had power locks in his car when he was leaving, going just kept going up and down. Another guy's navigation on his phone kept directing him back to the house when he left. Yeah. So, and this is not a person who sensationalizes a lot of stuff, or embellishes. So when he knew we were going, and then he kind of gave us the cautionary, I wanted to go into that prepared for the possibility, right?
Right.
Maybe the lights don't go off from the storm, but you have candles. That was my mission. And so I reached out to Pam. Pam Dink was the shaman who's I love her. She's great. just to be aware and prepared so that there was no grass growing under the feet with anything negative possible.
And a lot of people, sometimes, yes, sometimes people have problems with their aura. That's why it's easy for them to get an attachment. But I tell people, sometimes if you could be physically exhausted or you're getting sick, you're coming down with a cold, doesn't have to be anything emotional. Sometimes you're better off not going on some of these cases, especially like you said, if you know there's a possibility of something dark being there, because believe it or not, they're going to target you. Even if your physical defenses are down. Let's say you've been working overtime for the last week and you're really like, man, I could go to sleep, but instead you decide you're going to go there, or you're getting sick. I tell people there's times, no matter how much you want to go, especially if you already know there's a possibility of that there's an intelligent and possibly malevolent haunting at a location, you need to bow out for yourself and so that you don't become a liability to your team. And a lot of people don't see that, don't do that, because they don't realize how easy sometimes, again, it is for something like this to attach itself to you. Just because, even if you're physically depleted, because that's the way it works. And those are sometimes things that people don't take into consideration when they're going to participate in an investigation. Again, it's sometimes, like I said, you go on an investigation, there's nothing there, or it's residual, there's nothing there. But in a place like this that you already knew beforehand, hey, you know what? Whatever's there is intelligent, possibly dark, or at least knows how to manipulate, which in my experience, when you have an intelligent haunting that's manipulative, you're either talking non-human, which is not that common, non-human. And by the way, I say this before and everybody knows, when I say non-human, I don't only mean demonic. There's a lot of other non-human entities out there besides demons.
Right.
Either non-human, or if it is human, it was probably a very dark personality in life. That they were manipulative even when they were alive. And they know they're dead, and they're still, in other words, it's just as bad as a non-human attachment. Yeah. So, because your regular dead person that's got their own thing going on, whether they're on a loop or they built the house, sometimes depends, but they're not really that dark. They just don't do things of what you described. Yeah. It's like, as a matter of fact, they usually make themselves scarce. Like, man, I hope they pick up their crap and leave quick. And they'll go hide out in the attic or the basement or the closet or the cupboard. It's like, oh, let them go. Because all I want to do is hang out with the living, or maybe go around and this was their house. When you get stuff what you described, you have to be a little bit careful, because then you're dealing with something that is either wants to scare you away, or whenever the dead want to manipulate the living like that, that you got to be really, really careful, because it's all downhill from there. And a lot of people don't realize that as a living person, if you had an attachment and you die, you still carry that attachment with you. So you could have the ghost of what was a human person with a non-human entity still piggyback on it. Okay? Which makes it, a lot of people don't realize that really what you're dealing with is two entities. And maybe that's why this human person, when they were alive, maybe did a lot of dark, terrible things. And now that they're dead, that they still have that attachment. A lot of people don't realize when they encounter dark stuff, really what's at the root of it.
Right. And that very well could be the story behind, I don't know, but it could be the story behind Hinsdale, because there were two brothers that at some point in its history were killing travelers as they went by, and we worked with a psychic from New Jersey. Her name is Intuitive April. You look her up on Facebook. She's one of my friends. She was seeing just like the souls of the dead just walking, tons of them walking the dirt road outside of that house, and she was saying there was stuff under the house. Like, it was just animals killed. Like, it just was. And so she's coming with us this next time. Right.
See, that's. In other words, there's a lot to what went on there. In other words.
Yeah. There's definitely enough of a B12 shot to energize whatever negative stuff might be going on. So yeah, we felt it on the way in, and I was just like, you know what, I'm reaching out to Pam. What do I need to do? And she could tell immediately that I was more grounded and more solid than I had been in the past, especially since she knew me when I went through the other situation. So
Yeah.
I will not be so susceptible again.
Believe it or not, what you did when you, I don't believe in confrontation, but what you said that you told this entity, hey, you're going to get out of here. I tell people the same thing. You see a lot of people give up control of their space, of their person very easily to supernatural. It's like, no, you have to, this is you're supposed to be here. You're alive. And you see a lot of people just give up their power very easily.
My friend Phyllis Douglas, the shaman who actually did the ceremony to get rid of it, she told me that I can't Palo Santos or sage it away.
Mm-hmm.
But it does affect it, and it doesn't like it.
Of course.
It keeps it at arm's length, which it's not happy about, but it pushes it back. And then she would have me come in to get rid of it. So when she told me that, that's when I did the whole Cheech and Chong thing.
Yeah.
And I sat in my car, I just filled it up with the sage smoke, and I'm like, how do you like me now? I'm like, so Hugh Hefner with a cigar of sage.
You know what? People don't realize that is like nails on a chalkboard for those things. It's like, yes. Oh, absolutely. It's not like, okay. And depending sometimes whether, because there's different layers of attachment, sometimes I'll actually leave. And maybe, she realized what it was for some reason that you were going to need an intercession from a shaman to dislodge it. But there's other times that, depending, especially if it's just fresh, you start doing that. And I used to sage down my car when I would leave an investigation. I mean, even if I turned a corner and I had other investigations, because, everybody would come in their vehicle and they would be like, what are you doing, Marlene? I'm like, I'm making sure nobody's coming home with me.
Yep.
Nope. Thanks. No thanks. They can hitchhike with you. And after a while, I started doing it.
It all sounds crazy till it happens.
Exactly.
It all sounds crazy till it happens. And when it does, like I said, for now it's a great story. But at the time,
and there's so many interesting places in the area where you live now, up there in New York, New Jersey, the Northeast.
So that's one of the things. So it's so funny. So here I am. I started in LA, right?
Right.
This group Power they used Meetup because they had, I don't know, 25, 30 people.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of events would be like 18 or 20 people max. So the first ones to RSVP would get to go to that one. Then you're on a waiting list if somebody can't go, whatever.
Right.
Just to try to make it fair. But they were active. At least every month they had one thing, maybe two.
Okay.
I moved back to New Jersey. My ex-wife and I are, again, very good friends, and it was to put my son near his family.
Okay.
So we come back. Before I come back, I look for a group that's Ghost Adventures Crew, GAC affiliated, because that's the one I was with there.
Right.
I've become a member of Central Jersey Paranormal Research Group.
Okay.
Great people. It was a nice team. They've since disbanded. The couple who started it moved to Altoona, Pennsylvania, and so then the one guy was going to take over and run it, and it just fell apart. I think everybody kind of went different ways, but they weren't doing that much stuff. We did a couple of residential things. We did like an old pub in Plainfield, New Jersey. It was kind of like, and I felt like I am not doing any of this, and I didn't want to move here and give up. That was one of the things about moving away from California that I didn't like. I'm like, now I got on a team here, and now I'm going to leave that. And everybody's like, oh, there's so many old places in the East. I went, I don't know anything. And then I'm with a group that's not really doing anything. They had mentioned a place called the Shanley, not the Stanley in Colorado. The Shanley in Ellenville or Napanoch, New York, which I just went to last Saturday, actually. It just reopened. It was closed for a while. The original owner, Sal, who everybody loved, died, and it was mishandled for a while. And then they mentioned this place, Shanley, and I'm hearing all this stuff about it, but then they never went. So finally, I may become friends with this guy, Dennis, who lives in Manhattan. And then from going to the New Jersey Para Unity Expo, that New Jersey Paranormal NJP and John Ruggiero and is Chris Theron, who are part of that group, do a fantastic job to do. It's a huge expo. It's grown every year like weeds.
Wow.
The New Jersey Para Unity Expo. It's so well done. So I became friends and met other people and stuff, and then through talking to other people and then signing up for little public things here and there, I started to realize what you just said, which is that there are really a lot of places here. Morris Jamel Mansions is by car just across the river in Manhattan, maybe 18, 20 minutes away. Mm-hmm. There are places out on Long Island, New York. Kreischer Mansion in Staten Island.
God.
South.
I did a thing, an article on Kreischer Mansion, which is like, you know, that lady that's haunting is not who they say it is.
I don't even know if that place is operating anymore, too. I did it 2 years ago.
I want to say like 2 years ago it had gone up for sale, and I don't know if somebody bought it or what happened with it. I don't know. I don't know what became of it. But that's a really interesting. But I did the historical research on the Kreischer, what happened and everything. Besides the guy that they killed, that they.
Are you from the Northeast, or are you just very familiar with the landscape? Okay.
But my husband, he's from Elizabeth. Well, from Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, New Jersey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh wow! All right, so I grew up in Union, New Jersey, which is the next town. It's a neighboring town.
Right, and I mean, he came down here like in 2000, but he still calls it home. But no, I don't. I was born and raised here in Miami. I mean, I went up there, to visit family. But like I said, but there's a lot of interesting places. And when you're in this and you read about all these different places and
clearly you're familiar with the landscape outside of your immediate area.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Quite well. Yeah, that's. I
mean, I've worked with other groups. I've always been freelance, and I've worked with a lot of groups from around the United States. But besides that, I look at some of these locations because, like I said, sometimes it's really interesting. I mean, the truth is stranger than the fiction of these locations.
Yeah.
And one of them is a Kreischer Mansion, as far as not the actual history of the family. I mean, they had a suicide and everything. But yeah, I don't know. Like I said, like 2 years ago, it was up for sale. They had like renovated it and I believe they shot a little bit of Boardwalk Empire there, a couple of scenes.
Yes, I heard that. I was there not this past November of the last year.
Mm-hmm.
The year before that November, right before I went to Los Angeles, my girlfriend and I went to Kreischer and we did a Ghost Hunts USA event because they were running something and we really wanted to go to that place, and we finally saw there was an availability, so we went and did that. Other places, I don't know if you heard of too that I've come to know and love here. There's a woman named Laura Cole Shirley who runs Haldeman Mansion in Bainbridge, Pennsylvania. It's near York.
Okay, no.
Haldeman, fascinating place. White Hill Mansion, Fieldsboro, New Jersey. That's about an hour and a half south of here. It was built in 1723, so it's 53 years before this was the United States of America.
Yes.
It's another George Washington, Hessian soldiers kind of place, similar to Morris Jamel, which is 10 years. There's prior to the U.S.
God, because there's so many things, like you said, that area of Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, the original colonies. There's another one that's in Pennsylvania called Captain Grant's Inn, which is, again, pre-revolutionary, has a long history, is known to be haunted. And that's also a lot of the times where they have these graveyards. I mean, this was the time when people, basically you had small graveyards or family graveyards. It was very common. Not like now that you have the big city graveyards to even though over in New York, I know they have these huge, what is it? I'm trying to think, is it Green Lawn or I can't. All these cemeteries, they all have the same names.
I know. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. So now I'm working with a group. I'm part of a group called Island Paranormal Society. They're out of Long Island, New York. It's run by a guy named Matt Haas.
Okay.
They do a place. It's a historic place in New Jersey, in Clifton, called the Kingsland Manor.
Okay.
That's another place if you want to look it up. Kingsland Manor. It's it's a historic place, fascinating, very, very active. And there's a lot of places like what you were mentioning. There's a team called Seekers Club. I can't remember the whole name. It's the Seekers Club.
Okay.
They're out of Brooklyn. It's run by a guy named Anthony Simonelli. He does a lot of stuff with Island Paranormal Society.
Okay.
He lives right by the cemetery, like walking distance, pretty much from where the Fox sisters are.
Okay, from where they used to have the cabin and everything. Okay.
Yeah, from where their actual graves are.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Okay.
two of them are buried in that one cemetery it's right by Queens, by Glendale, New York.
Okay.
Um, so there's one of those locations there. There's people, again, New Jersey Paranormal, John Ruggiero and Chris there, and they run a bunch of historic locations throughout New Jersey. And then they do shows or events at Burlington County Prison in South Jersey.
Okay.
I've yet to go to yet, but then you have Eastern State Penitentiary.
Yeah, I've been to Eastern State. I've been to Rolling Hills up in by next to Buffalo.
Okay, I've not been there yet. That's on my list. Eastern State, I did. Rolling Hills is on my list.
Let me tell you something. That place is remote, so I'm thinking that when that was out there, like that's really, if you want to have somebody disappear, you would take them out there. It's in the middle of
Rolling
nowhere.
Hills?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like nothing. I mean, I was looking at it, I'm thinking, I can imagine this 200 years ago. This was in the middle, absolutely, of nowhere. In other words, this was a place where you would drop off family members. It was a poor farm, but also where, they took a lot of people that had some type of disability. Yeah, and the family don't. This was a place to take them because nobody was going to find you out there.
Yeah.
Very interesting place.
I've been doing events a couple per month. Like the activity since when I first moved back, where I felt like I wasn't doing anything, is like I'm nowhere near that now. Now I'm doing so much stuff, and there are still places I have not gotten to.
Yes.
Rolling Hills is on the list. Penhurst is on my list.
I would love to go to Penhurst.
If you ever come up, let me know because
Yes.
that's on my list too.
Let me tell you something. Asylums, I hate to say it. I tell everybody I don't need to go.
They're active.
Unfortunately, they're going to be active. That's just because of what took place there.
There's a Paracon that's run there, and there's a lot of events that are run there by a gentleman named Bob Christopher, and then his lady Gina Bengtson. They run stuff at Penhurst. Then there's Pamela and Steve Barry, who are from the Gettysburg Ghost Exchange in Gettysburg.
Yeah.
And they run. There's a new place called I think Lighthouse or something. They run a couple of things out by Gettysburg too, and these are all people who are running quality events at some of these historic places that I am now becoming familiar with.
I've been to Gettysburg three times, and Gettysburg. I mean, it's beautiful just to go out there, even if you're just sightseeing. But that place, absolutely, it's got residual stuff. But again, I think it's just the timing also to have an experience out there.
Yeah. And so all this stuff that we're talking about, all these locations, again, Morris, Jamel, White Hill Mansion, all these places at Gettysburg, as active and hot-spottish as they are. And I don't even know if hot-spottish is a word, but I just used it.
Why not?
Yeah. Still, for me, the most consistently active place I've ever been to is David Ullman's house in Beverly Hills.
Yeah. And I remember asking Dave, was there anything here on this piece of land? And he goes, no. He says, there was nothing here. But you know that Benedict Canyon has got a lot of...
Oh.
God, that place is...
They say Native American burial, or at least Native American grounds, if not sacred burial, It's at least Native American grounds, of course, back in the day, for one. The national, the NGI, the Geo... Oh, I've drawn a blank on the name of that. The geomagnetic readings are anomalous at this location, and so the Geological Society they don't know why that they get like negative milligauss and positive, and it's like a 5,000 plus or minus. Outside
it's
the
like
house,
really weird stuff going on there.
It's bizarre. There's an off balance light feeling on the bottom third floor, and so that's a superconductor.
Well, that
for activity.
That the ghost that Dave says that he saw, which is Jay, which was the guy that got killed by the Manson family with Sharon Tate. But they had been engaged at one point, but then at that point they were just good friends. Okay. Right. He had a house there close by. He lived in the vicinity.
Okay.
On Benedict. His house that had stuff going on in it before. His own house. Jay's own house. They had Rudy Valentino used to live there in Benedict Canyon. A lot of weird stuff. He had a cursed ring. And it's like a lot of stuff from those houses there, that are very unusual as far as supernatural activity is concerned.
Yeah,
Really
it's just
unusual.
funny to me, all the old places with all the history and all the undocumented history that we talked
Yeah.
about that could be part of certain places and all that, right? And yet that location, I think because of the geological anomaly and because of the history, both Native American and after, that place is still like how we said before. It is so unpredictable how you can go to places and just get nothing, and then all of a sudden you might get something. Or
Yeah.
every time I've been to David's house, every single time, the little figurines falling down. Well, we saw a movie poster, full size movie poster that's right behind his bar with a glass front and a frame, come off the wall by itself in slow motion, one hook at a time. 7 of us watched that, and
Well,
then David caught it before it hit the bar.
I don't know if
So
he told you that there was stuff happening while the house was being built. That he
yes,
had construction people having
yep,
experiences, hearing people on the stairs while the house was under construction. That
yeah.
they kind of were like didn't want to say anything.
Now the house next to his on the street on Seattle Drive,
Hmm.
I think it's one house closer towards where the original gate to the mansion was.
Right.
You know, the mansion that was there originally was torn down in '94,
Right.
and it was divided into lots, one of which David and his father built on. The
Right.
one next to it, they rented out to a bunch of kids, I don't know if they're college kids or YouTubers or whatever. So David had become friends with them, and so the last time I was there a year ago, we went into their house also
Okay.
with some of the equipment, and we're doing some stuff too. And there was some weird stuff happening in that house too.
Say that. That's what I'm saying. That whatever was there was on the land before. And again, a lot of, when you get to what happened with Sharon Tate and the murder and all of that. I mean, was it? I mean, if you think about it, was it just the person's destiny that this was going to happen to them, or was there something there active on that land that brought
Yeah,
these? You know how when people cross paths, talk about being at the wrong place at the wrong time. Was this
yeah,
absolutely the wrong place? And then there's other people that, sometimes, how you dodge the bullet. Sometimes people get killed and the the one person misses the plane, doesn't go to the party, whatever the case might be. I mean, again,
yeah,
was it yeah, but that's a very interesting area. There's a lot of other stories attached to it. The thing with this murder, of course, it's garnered a lot of attention and exposure. But if you do a lot
definitely.
of research, a lot of weird stuff have happened to houses that are in that area right there. Very unusual, and usually
Yep.
gruesome stuff.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the but in your area, God, there's so many. Long Island. I don't know what it is about Long Island. It's got a lot of unusual like anomalies
yeah,
and places that are sound like they would be great to investigate them.
yeah. I just started working with Island Paranormal Society, and so they have a place. It's an undisclosed location. They don't broadcast it
Right.
because it's not open to the public, kind of thing, for tours and investigations. But they consider it their lab, where they get to
Right.
go. Here's the keys. Stay as long as you like. Use your stuff, well, whatever. And so I'd heard about this before I was with that group, and so for the first time on the 5th of January, actually, we got to go out and investigate that place. And it was a big, beautiful location, and it was pretty active. It was pretty darn active. We got some bizarre results. It had a I can tell you this. It had a servant's quarters on the top floor.
Okay.
Um, it's not, I don't think, 1600, 1700s old. I think it's
Okay.
probably 18.
Okay.
Um, and so there was me and 2 or 3 other gentlemen on the top floor in the servants' quarters area. It's like a long area with a lot of rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And my girlfriend, who's of Puerto Rican descent, and
Okay.
she's darker skin and darker hair. So
Mm-hmm.
she's a darker skinned Latina.
Okay.
Um, and so she asks during a spirit box session if we're speaking to the lady of the house. And clear as day, through the speaker comes the N word. And
Oh,
we didn't hear that we didn't hear it at the time, but we heard it when we reviewed.
which
Now,
is
why was that interesting? Because of the next question, because we didn't hear that. I asked, And I said, whose quarters are these? What area of the house we in? And then it said her name.
Really?
The next thing was I asked what section of the house. I was looking for the word servant.
Right.
Or I don't think they had slaves, but I was looking for servants to coming out of the spirit box without saying it. So I said, what section of the house we in? Whose area was this, whatever? And it says, her name is Lourdes. And it goes, Lourdes's. And that we heard,
wow.
when we put it together reviewing the evidence, we were like, what?
Yeah. Same.
So only in Long Island do you get racially profiled and insulted by a spirit.
And that goes, but I hate to, when you look at it within the context, but then it adds validity because this was the mindset.
Absolutely.
Of whoever lived there maybe at that time. You know,
absolutely.
Because back that entity is not thinking about political correctness. You see what I'm saying?
No, of course not.
They're like, blah. So, of course, that tells you, okay, whoever's here, first of all, is intelligent. Is an intelligent haunting, okay, and they're like, in other words, they're answering your question. Because sometimes,
I can send that to you too, because we didn't hear the insult part at the moment. We might have heard the word come out, but this is why you record sessions, especially not just EVP but Spirit Box, because you will always, not always, but a lot of the times you'll hear more in review that you may have missed. You may hear a word, but there may have been a phrase.
Yes.
So we didn't hear that, but when we reviewed it, excuse me, I'm laughing. When we reviewed it, it connected to the next question because I asked about what area we were in, and then it was like they were trying to tell us, you're not getting it. It's her.
Yes.
So.
And you know what? And despite you might think, even servants had a pecking order. So even though you might think it might have been the owner of the house, it could have also been servants, because servants, they had their pecking order where they would look down on other servants depending on what you did in the household. So it could also have very well have been, for all you know, the housekeeper, you know, the one that had the chains on her waist and ran the house. And that happens a lot. And then maybe that's why she was up there, because... You know, they kind of ran. If you were a servant in one of these houses, they kind of ran your life. You know, you had to stay up there, and you had to behave, and you had to be good, and that's what you got in exchange for getting employment. Yeah.
Just to make our personal political correctness standpoints clear, when we heard both of those pieces of evidence sitting right here, we were in tears laughing for about 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
We thought it was hilarious. We went, wow, that's just, I mean, as evidence goes, it was pretty compelling.
Exactly. That's what my point. Exactly.
Because it was clear and it seemed to be contextual. But well, we were laughing quite hard.
I hate to say it, but sometimes this is what you get when you're looking for something that's genuine, authentic. This is how authentic it can get.
Yeah.
You know, I've had people... Just the same thing that you talked about. I've had people that get targeted because whatever's there doesn't like men or doesn't like women.
Yep.
And I've had people go into places that if you're a woman, you're going to have a problem. Or vice versa. If you're a man, you're going to have a problem. And it kind of... And because these are the biases that the dead have, just because... In other words, just because you're dead doesn't mean you're kind of any different than who you were when you were alive. And there's a lot of rotten people out there.
Yeah, and those biases and stuff, sadly, you know, to this day still exist with some people. But those were the truths that they lived, that they knew at the time in these given locations too. There's at White Hill Mansion in Fieldsboro, New Jersey, the place that was from 1723 that I mentioned a few moments ago. Mm-hmm. There's a bar downstairs. I think Paranormal locked down one there also. Whoever does not like women behind the bar. So what does every group that go down there do?
Put a woman behind the bar.
They put a woman behind the bar. Start asking questions.
Yeah.
And that's what you do, I guess. If you want to test a theory and see if it holds up, you know, the Elijah Jamel bedroom thing, right? They say when it's men in there, she doesn't like a man in her bedroom.
Yeah. Evidence
sometimes seem to be a little bit thin when it's just a group of women investigating there. Ta-da! So
you get a lot of feedback.
we went with the ta-da approach, and then the curtain rod came down.
That's pretty ta-da right there.
Yeah,
There's
it kind of is.
Well, that part of Hell's Kitchen in New York. Once upon a time, this was obviously that's why it was called Hell's Kitchen. But God, horrible things went on there. That they had these taverns and what I think several of them were called the House of Blazes because it was like everything went on there. They had prostitution going on upstairs and a saloon downstairs, and talk about people getting killed. And, and a lot of these places later on, they made them into houses or apartments. And I'm thinking, I imagine there's got to be people that have lived in some of these places that have got the most weirdest paranormal occurrences going on.
Yeah, so I mentioned...
Go ahead.
I mentioned a friend earlier named my friend Dennis. His name is Dennis Tassone. He'll love that I mentioned him on here. I went to the Shanley in upstate New York. He lives right in the Hell's Kitchen area.
Okay.
So he works at a place that's like a Broadway paraphernalia and stuff, whatever store in Times Square right near there. Mm-hmm. And he knows of, I think even where he works, but he knows of places in that area where unfortunately you can't get these places to let teams. They won't let people investigate. Right. Manhattan's a very hard nut to crack. The Morris Jamel Mansion, just because it's so far uptown,
right,
and in a historic place, and they, they seem to get some of the benefit from it.
Yeah, I was gonna say they're getting the benefit of it. Yeah, absolutely.
So, but a lot of places in Manhattan don't, and that benefit of it thing is really a huge thing too, by the way, because people don't realize that one of the byproducts that comes from this paranormal stuff being so popular is Haldeman Mansion in Bainbridge, PA, that Laura Coltroli runs, White Hill Mansion down in Fieldsboro. These places, if they just did school field trips and did the occasional picnic or a movie on the front lawn kind of thing, right, they're not making that much money.
Right.
But when you get ghost hunting groups that are coming in there, spending $1,000 or $800 for a Friday night,
yep,
they're making so much more revenue than they would make if they didn't do it.
Absolutely.
And so you're bringing in a class of people, for all intents and purposes, most of us, right? Most of us appreciate, admire, and respect the history.
Exactly.
So you have people who understand where they are, they respect the location, they want it to be there for themselves to come back and other people, and they're putting money into that's putting a new roof on the place or helping keep the heat on or whatever it is. And so what better synergy and combination of things can you possibly ask for in this field than to have a place that's being able to sustain itself from 1723 or 1766 or whatever it is, and still have that to share with the school kids or with whoever wants to see it, the museum when they do shows or whatever. But
a lot of these places, they're able, because let's face it, even these places, even if it's old, it needs upkeep. As a matter of fact, it needs a lot of upkeep. People don't realize that. When even if it's not even for paranormal investigators, because I know of a lot of these places that become like labs where a team can go there, let's say for the weekend, and spend an overnight. But still, even if it's not that, even if it's just a regular historical place where you have a docent that takes you on a thing, if it has a reputation of possibly being haunted, I think you do get more traffic.
100% too. White Hill Mansion in Fieldsboro, New Jersey, saw a boom in foot traffic.
Yes.
Like somebody opened up a motor vehicle agency inside Disneyland kind of traffic. When they were on paranormal lockdown with Nick Groff.
Yeah, of course.
And then all of a sudden, boom! Here come the people. But to me, again, I think that's great. That Haldeman Mansion in Bainbridge, it needed a new roof. The place needed a new roof, and it got to do that from people like us, spending our 50, 100, 150, whatever, for this and that, and go in there and buy a T-shirt, whatever, and then every week there's people in that place, and then now it's still there.
Exactly, and. For all because I've done a lot of private homes. Have you done any private home?
I've done some residential, not the majority of what I've done, purely through circumstance. I just some of the groups that I have been in, have chosen to not do them because they feel like it's a liability waiting to happen. Yes. Some of them I have been in are more focused on the helping people part of it.
Right.
And then, so the group I'm in now, Island Paranormal Society from Long Island, New York, they do them.
Right.
But when they do them, they go with a thinner team. They'll go with maybe
Mm-hmm.
3 or 4 people,
Right.
maybe 5, I think, but not the whole group. So we had just had a meeting recently, and they wanted to make sure who was okay with the residential stuff. So
Right.
if there is one, I could be on it, or I could not be on it.
Right. And I mean, I've done a lot of residential stuff, and it's really weird because it's and you're absolutely right. Sometimes there's dynamics going on there
Right.
that I want to say I've gone to some where it's like there's nothing supernatural here. There's some, whether it's mental illness or dysfunction in the family, whatever,
Yep.
and you got to step back away from it. Other times you get both things, and one, you do have dysfunction
Yep.
slash mental illness, instability being fueled along by supernatural, and unfortunately, as a team, even though you might want to help them out, you still got to be really careful
Yeah.
because of something else that's going on there. So it's
Right.
and you know what? And I hate to say it, but because nowadays, 20 years ago, there wasn't so much, I want to say, lawsuit crazy things going on.
Yeah.
And nowadays, yes, I totally understand why some teams now, when it comes to residential ones, they're very careful how they handle that, or where they're going into, or what they hear when they do a pre-interview with a client.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of pre-interview stuff, the questionnaires, and then
Yeah.
they go through some steps before they'll even
Yes.
entertain going in with a
Yes.
full crew and the whole thing. Yeah, absolutely. You have to be careful with that stuff for sure. You don't
Yes.
know all the time what's happening in that house before they moved in or while they're there.
Yes. And I mean,
You
and
don't
you
know.
have people that you want to help them, but and especially now after this thing with, the paranormal shows where it's like, you're not really scared. You're kind of happy that you've got this haunting going on. And basically,
Right.
you don't want to resolve the problem. All you're hoping is that somebody's going to come in and either, number one, confirm it, and then tell you who it is. Okay? And I've, in other shows that I've done, I've talked about, especially the people with darker hauntings. I tell them,
Right.
the last thing you want is for that to be accurate. I tell them, you should be hoping that when you have a team go in there, tell you, hey, you know what? You've got a vent, or you've got a raccoon trapped in your attic. There's nothing here supernatural. And
Right.
because people think it's so exciting, it's like, you don't really understand the way the supernatural works. Even with a deceased, when I say a regular dead person,
Yeah.
eventually there's something, especially if the family stays there for a while, it just doesn't work out in the favor of the living. So I tell people, you know what, and I've seen it. I've gone into enough investigations that you're not, when they contact you, they want you there yesterday. Oh my God, please help us, come out quick, quick, quick. Then when
Right.
you get there and you start talking and interviewing and finding out, and they're kind of excited, and of course at the end, it's obviously they're the homeowners or they're the ones living there. But I
Right.
think
Right.
I've given everybody the same advice. You know that eventually this is going to go south for you. It might be next year. It might take 10 years. Oh, no, it's okay. We don't want the spirit to leave. And it's like, okay, sure.
Yeah. 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 No,
Good.
that's
And
100%. A lot of times they just want to see the stuff they see on TV in their living room.
yes.
There's 3D, there's 4K, and then there's, look, these efforts are right here.
Yeah, yeah.
They're in
And,
front of my ottoman.
yeah,
But
and-
that's
And the people don't realize, man, what you should be hoping for is that the team that goes in there tells you, hey, guess what? Your faucet or your pipe back there, have you noticed? Remember when ghost hunters were, that originally when they first started, that they were,
right.
plumbers.
Plumbers.
And that they would find, hey, you've got a leaky faucet or that pipe, that they were, and it was like, man, believe it or not, that is the best outcome for if you really think that your house is haunted. And I know
Right.
that people go, that's so dull. And it's like, no, it's
Yeah.
not. If you
Not the best
really-
outcomes for ratings if you're a TV producer.
Well,
but
this
it
is
is
for the
for the
reality of
residents.
people that are out there
Yeah.
that see this. When you've been involved in this work, Ron, for a really long time, because you have to understand, one thing is when you go visit someplace, and when it's all done, you pack up and you leave. We're talking about the
Yeah.
people that are living there.
Yep.
People don't understand. This is not what you want. It's not exciting. I've seen a lot of people that their life has unraveled. And when you somehow go to the point of origin, it started either when they started dabbling in something or when they moved into the house and they recognized there's something there. But maybe
Yeah.
at the beginning it wasn't really sinister. It was, oh, we would hear some knockings or some. And then as the time went by, it kept getting worse and worse. And then
Yeah.
10 years later, they're like at their wits' end and a lot of really malevolent stuff. And it's like, oh, but 10 years ago, I'm telling you,
Yeah.
it's if you've done this work for a while, you do not want to coexist with the dead. I don't care what anybody says out there. And I know that there's a lot of paranormal investigators out there, and I've seen plenty of them, that this is what they say. Oh, well, it doesn't feel like anything malevolent, so it's okay. And I'm like, okay, sure.
Yeah. Because
No.
crazy people always run out there with blood-stained clothes and sharp objects.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Of course, that's part of the deception, is to not to seem like something you're supposed to dodge and avoid.
Yes. Yes. And
That's
let me ask you something. Have you done any investigations with, because I'm going somewhere with this, with any supposed children, spirit children or ghost children?
um yes. Most famously would be the little ghost girl Jackie, who exists in the pool area in the
And the
ladies'
Queen
changing
Mary?
area on the Queen Mary.
Mm-hmm.
Which is interesting because I know that the angle is that a lot of times people think that if it's a child spirit or an alleged child spirit, that it's actually something dark or demonic that's using that as a guise to bring you in. And so when Ghost Adventures went there and did an episode, they had Sophia Temporelli, who's a young girl who's a psychic medium.
Mm-hmm.
She's an old friend. Her parents I knew from when I lived out in L.A., and I knew her when she was much younger. They were friends with Peter James, who we mentioned
Okay.
earlier, whose home base used to be there. And he was communicating supposedly with this ghost girl, Jackie, in that pool area. I've never had any interactions with that spirit specifically.
Okay.
There were other people who got a voice that was identical to the one that Peter James got of the kid
Okay.
in that area. Ghost Adventures went there, and they were the first ones who either took the approach or had the angle play out of that being not a child, but
Okay.
being something dark that was under the guises of a child.
Okay.
And I don't know if you remember that specific episode. It was with, and this is someone I was fortunate enough to work with once or twice. Was Debbie Constantina was on that
Yes.
episode.
Yes. I remember that.
So I got to work with her at the Glen Tavern Inn
Oh, really? Okay.
once before. Yeah, she was very nice. I didn't meet Mark. He was supposed to be there, but he wasn't able to come at the time. But she was on that episode, and then she was communicating through EVP,
Mm-hmm.
allegedly with this ghost girl, Jackie. I'm trying to think of any other places that I've been. I know there had been. Well, okay, so this is not in a lesser scale than what that thing is purported to be.
Okay.
That Haldeman Mansion in Bainbridge, PA, has a summer kitchen
Okay.
where those little places had, so with the excruciating summer heat.
Okay.
One of the places in the Northeast had a separate structure for the kitchen during that time of year.
Exactly.
Put the
Okay.
cooking outside. So we were there. It was myself, my girlfriend, a couple other females, and one other guy. And we got on a recording a voice, like a disembodied voice of a little girl chuckling and saying, "Follow me" or "Come with me" or something, whatever.
Okay.
We didn't hear it at the time. And none of us were talking, or one person had talked, so we know it wasn't them. So we were able to rule everybody out using video also to make sure that nobody had done it.
Uh-huh.
So there was a voice that was definitely childlike. We didn't get anything else to corroborate or to check it off of.
Right.
The video didn't pick up the same voice as the recorder did. It just showed us that it was none of the people in the room.
Okay. See, that's interesting. That's interesting.
So,
Yeah.
but I know what you're saying. So I was when I was with that Central Jersey Paranormal Research Group. One of the residential cases they got was they went to a mansion in Colts Neck, New Jersey,
Okay.
That they said they thought the lady had a thing with maybe pills and stuff, whatever, or medications. She had two adopted daughters that were from some part of Asia, I forget where, and so she had everybody at the house. So they went to go down. This is when I first moved back. So I was with my son that week. I couldn't go.
Okay.
So they went. They spent 12 hours with 14 cameras and DVRs and EVP stuff and everything you can think of. And the only thing they came away with was an EVP of a chicken.
You're kidding me.
It used to be farm area, and they got an EVP of a
priceless.
chicken. Yeah. I went, you have to be clucking kidding me. And they went, no, that's what we got.
That's great. Oh my god.
They thought that the lady was just, she had a daughter that died, I guess 19, I think, whatever.
Okay.
It might have been suicide. They thought that the lady was, through medication and whatever, and they didn't think it was anything there.
Okay.
Once they were there. Their initial thing was that they had thought from what they had heard that it was either a land guardian or that it possibly was something demonic.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, so what if it is? And they said, well, we have a spiritualist lady, whatever that, from the UK who's going to come in and come with us if it is.
Okay.
I went, yeah, but you're going there without her the first time. If you think that's what might be there, fly her in now. I mean, like,
right, yeah, like
you can't. You don't walk into a bad neighborhood
and
bar.
why would they?
and go,
why were they thinking that?
Who wants to fight? And everybody pulls out guns. You go, oh, guns! I have a gun. Let me go get it.
Yeah, hold the
It's at home.
thought. I'll be right back.
So I don't know what was going on there. The next time they went back months later, I went with them, and then we were getting stuff. I like using the spirit box or spirit boxes.
Right.
They had it. They owned them. They didn't use them really a lot. But they knew that it was kind of like my bread and butter. We got the daughter's name came through. We got some stuff that was kind of compelling. And so the second visit was much more active and much more fruitful as far as evidence goes when we went back. But the part of the takeaway from the story is that I remember when they were saying they thought it was either a land guardian situation, like elemental maybe,
Okay.
or something demonic.
Okay.
And if they were right, they were going to come back with the proper. I was like, no, it's.
No, I mean, if you're already going in that direction, yeah, you go prepared.
That's like running somebody over and then honking the horn.
It's like,
It's just at this point, it's too late. Now you're there.
Exactly.
Now what do you do?
Yes. No. And did they ever tell you why they thought that to begin with? Why they thought that it was something either an elemental or demonic?
If I'm not mistaken, it was based on some of the situations and stories that were conveyed by the homeowner.
Okay.
To them.
Okay.
And I think where the disconnect happened was when they went there for the first time with all the gear and spent hours there.
Okay.
After that, they didn't experience even a fraction of what she told them was going on there.
All right.
Which, as you and I both know, could very well be if something thinks that the owners are trying to eradicate them. That might have been a lay low, let's not show off what we do.
Oh, yeah.
Because we don't want these people messing with us and trying to get us out of here.
Absolutely. They're hoping that the homeowner will call it off. Everything will go back. It's like, oh, it's okay. And it's like, yeah. And I tell everybody, when I was an investigator, my first tip off that either I was going to get an investigation or right after I had found out about it that it was an intelligent haunting is I used to have a detached garage which I had made into an office, and one of the windows had that frosted glass. Sometimes I would sit out there working, but it was more quiet. And there was a little walkway that faced the back of the house where that frosted window was at, and the only thing I had back there was like my trash cans. I would hide them there, and as soon as I would see shadows crossing back and forth on the other side of that frosted window, I knew one of two things. Either I was about to get a case, or if I had gotten one, it was like, okay, this is an intelligent haunting, because you will find that if it is an intelligent haunting, they'll do exactly what you said. They'll either bring down activity, hoping that the homeowner, whoever called in the team, will say, oh, it's over. Okay, call it off. Or they'll try to interfere or scare off the team that's planning to come in.
Right, and that was something that would happen to Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Mm-hmm.
before they would go to cases, a lot of times they would get experiences or visitations
Yes.
before they got the case, because whatever it
Yes.
was trying to make sure that they would maybe not go.
Yes. And that is absolutely, anybody that's done this for a while will tell you that if you think that it starts when you go there, and no. And when I saw that, it's like, not only is it something there, whatever is there is intelligent, because they're
Right.
trying to cut you off at the pass. And I've had that
Right.
experience a bunch of times, where whenever I would just turn around, I would see, and it's like, when you're familiar with your house or with the activity in your house,
Right.
either if it was daytime or even at night, because I had like a porch light that, in other words, the light, if anything broke the light, you would see there was nothing. First of all, the windows, no animal, nothing. And it was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I know it's gonna, all right. And sure enough, either I would get a case or I had just gotten it. And again, that falls into manipulation, possible non-human activity taking place there as far as the entities that are there. Doesn't mean the only one,
Yeah. Right.
but I mean, it's when you do this for a while, that's what I'm saying. You have to be like really careful. And believe it or not, you see that more often with residential cases than you do with these historical places. You don't
Right,
really
right.
see that with historical places. You usually see that with like residential stuff that's going on, that like what you described, that they'll say some of the things, it's like,
Right.
I mean, there's it's and my experience is that the more an entity can do that, or either manipulate time, space, or if you're there, movement, like what you were
Yeah.
describing, you got to be really careful, because you might possibly not be talking just a human entity.
Right.
Usually, to be able to exert that much, how can I say, energy to display something heavy. But the only time that doesn't work is if it's poltergeist, which is basically displaced human, PK activity. That's why
Right.
I don't know if you've ever seen some of these poltergeist stories where heavy stuff flies, and that's different. But if it's not a poltergeist, when you said that thing about, what was it, that picture, the curtain and everything came down, and
Yeah.
that's like, what? Okay.
Yeah.
Very,
Yeah.
very.
There's been a couple of those kind of circumstances too, and it's important, like the stuff that that you're talking about now. It's great that you do a show as often as you do, and that people can hear this stuff.
Yeah.
Because the people who are doing it the longest, in some way, I think, carry some level of responsibility of educating the people who follow you.
Sure.
Because while you can learn from TV, I don't bash the TV shows.
Right.
I get it. I know what entertainment is. I watch Thor. I don't expect to reach out and have a metal hammer come into my hand and lightning to come down.
Right.
I get it. I know where pretend draws the line. That's part of maturity, and I'm working on it. I haven't mastered it yet.
Yeah.
But there's people who have been doing it longer than me, and there's people who are doing it less than I have been doing it, who may have learned from somebody who's doing it longer.
Yes.
So every one of those opportunities, another gentleman that we had a chance to interact with and become friends with and learn from, since I had mentioned the Warrens, is their son-in-law, Tony Sparrow, who runs
Yes.
the Curiosities Museum that Ed and Lorraine had. It's not open to the public at the moment, from what I understand, but we got to partake in an event in October around Halloween,
Okay.
where Tony brought some of the stuff from the Haunted Museum, including the Annabelle doll,
Okay.
to the event. And then his tech guy, Tim Dalton, great guy, we went to Ed Warren's grave after the event, just before it started raining. And then so Tony explained some of the darker stuff and how that stuff works, how it interacts, stuff we were talking about, before, and the levels of oppression and whatever. He shared footage of some of the cases where they had exorcisms, and when somebody was talking in tongues, and the whole superhuman strength, and so you can be overly critical and not buy into that stuff. But at the same time, unless you can disprove it,
Of course.
then be doubtful but don't be naive. Because
Right.
there are people who have experienced these things who can't explain it any more than you, except the difference is they've experienced it. And when you go through something like that, or you witness something like that, just even to the level I have, watching a picture frame thing come off the wall in slow motion, that's nuts.
Yeah.
I'll have moments of doubt. I always tell people I'm not a skeptic or a believer. I'm an investigator.
Exactly.
And,
Right.
I carry a tempered amount of both. And I let what I assess in each given situation sway the meter to one side or the other.
Yes.
But I don't exist just on one side. Like I said earlier, because I believe when you have an agenda, you're already kind of closing off
Oh, of course.
possibilities. And by the way, the people who are skeptics wholeheartedly, whose full agenda is hell-bent on just proving that everything is a bunch of crap,
Right.
those specific people are never known for their accomplishments. They're only known for their agenda.
Exactly. Right. They're
Yeah,
like
the
the
first-
opposite of the person that's in it just for the sensationalism, while they're
Right.
getting their sensationalism from being the deniers or the skeptics or the, I don't believe it kind of thing.
Yeah, be skeptical. That's okay.
Yes.
Have skepticism. That's okay. But if you think that there's no truth to any of this stuff, that these things are all imagined, everything's, they say, oh, it's pareidolia. You heard what you heard what you wanted to hear. You didn't.
Right.
It didn't actually say the word, even though we heard the word. It didn't say it. You heard what you wanted to hear. So then I go, all right. I heard what I wanted to hear. I asked 20 questions.
Exactly.
Every one of those questions, I knew what I wanted to hear. What, in your wisdom, explains the gap between the hit and the 19 misses? Because I always wanted to hear it. So, why that one?
Exactly. Because if exactly. And sometimes the answers that you do get on EVPs, especially the real clear ones, are very
Yeah.
intelligent. They're very,
Yeah.
in other words, they're answering a specific question that's like, what are the odds on that?
Yeah, 100% too. It's astronomical. Even with the spirit box, people go, "Oh, well, it's radio."
Okay.
If you think it's radio, then you don't know how the device works. It's sweeping through the radio. It's not on
Yeah.
a frequency long enough to get that phrase.
Exactly.
It's not.
Because I've heard of
And
that,
when
that they say that, oh, it's picking up some talk from some station, and I don't understand what you're saying. That it's
Right,
not
no,
there
and
long
I-
enough.
No, and I've said this on countless podcast shows. If I'm using a spirit box and I ask, am I standing or sitting, and the word standing comes out, and that's radio bleed through in the same voice over multiple sweeps, but it's just radio, I want to know what station that was and when they're doing prize giveaways for cash and cars, because I have incredibly good luck.
Right. You're right. You're right. You are absolutely
just-
right.
And again, to be fair to both sides of the fence, right? I'm not proving the paranormal is real. I'm not proving that ghosts are real like that.
No.
But the experiences and the things that people are bringing as far as evidence or experiencing, those things are real. What the cause is, if everything has a rational explanation one day and it all goes away, then that day happens when it happens. But it hasn't happened yet.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
so I've had this conversation with countless people. I've taken something like this and just thrown it. I go, what was that? They go, I don't know. It's a UFO. It's an object that wasn't identified and it was flying. Was it little gray people in it? I don't know. Maybe not. Are they from another planet, dimension? I don't know. But I know that that's an unidentified object and it's flying.
Exactly.
So the experiences are real.
Yes.
It's what's behind it, how it happens, and who it is, and all those kind of things. That's where we're seeking answers.
Absolutely. And you know what, Ron, one of the things that I'm hoping you're going to come back on the show and talk about, because this has to do with paranormal and it gets into a little bit into the dark side, and is having to do with a lot of these hauntings based on, I'm not going to say occult practices, because there's people
Okay.
out there that know what they're doing. They're into occult practices because we call them occult practices, but they know what they're doing. I'm
Right.
talking about the people that dabble and stuff with, and then the ones that's going to whether it's necromancy or even in some cases necrophilia, that's
Right.
what opens the doors to a lot of dark hauntings at locations where sometimes people can't explain where did this come from?
Yeah.
How did this happen? Okay. And a lot of the, the, and so I don't have time. I wish I could go into it with you. And I know a lot of places in the Northeast, and I'm not saying, but in that area, sometimes because of the older, because it's an older area, how can I say that? That, it was just, there was more people there living, like you said, in the 1700s, pre-revolutionary. Right. You would be surprised at some of the stuff, even though, you always think of the Salem witch trials and, how that was hysteria, blah, 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 blah. But you'd be surprised. There was a lot of those areas up there where people were actually practicing very dark magic even back then. And let's say in contrast to the Puritans and, this whole thing that you have in that area. There was a lot of unusual stuff, which I think accounts for a lot of not just the hauntings, that very dark aspect to the hauntings.
Yeah, for sure.
And as a matter of fact, when you mentioned the Warrens, I don't know if you're familiar with Father. Well, he was in Father Malachi Martin, who passed away.
Yes, I know who he is.
In the in the 90s, and he spoke various times about stuff like that, and the interference, because of course, he absolutely he participated in exorcism, etc. And as a matter of fact, a lot of people think that the way he died had to do was caused by the last exorcism that he was involved with a child.
Right.
And he speaks a lot about people that dabble into that or what's the word I'm thinking of, that intentionally work into the dark realm and open up the portal, what he called the middle plateau, which is where you get a lot of non-human entities that bleed through and come into our domain, into our dimension, I guess, for lack of a better word. And I would love to bring you back and talk more about that. You think you'd be up for that, coming back on the show?
Absolutely. I had a great time. It's been enjoyable for me because like I said, I like to learn everywhere. I don't just mean investigating, but clearly, you are possessive of a lot of knowledge. You know the field, the craft. It's been fun on top of that too.
Yes,
I got to be a goofball over here.
Yes, absolutely. So, absolutely. It's been wonderful to talk to you because, again, I think that, you have the right, how can I say, the right mindset for doing this work. And everybody tells me, because I usually, a lot of times I've told people, there's a lot of people that are not suited to doing paranormal work. Their intentions are good. Don't get me wrong. Their intentions are good. Maybe they want to help, or maybe they're fascinated by it, or they just would like to do it. But not everybody's suited to this. And you are. I can tell you are. But there's people that I tell them, look, your best bet is to take a ghost tour and leave it at that for a lot of different reasons. This is because you're opening up Pandora's box, and you might not think it. Tell me that was that was, who was that, or what? You haven't.
You heard that?
Yes.
Yeah. You want it to be seen? Here you go.
Okay.
This guy.
What's his or her name?
His name is Pumpkin. It's my son's cat.
Hi, Pumpkin.
Say hi.
Okay.
Say hi. He's a mush. Right?
You know what?
On TV now.
I'm going to tell you a quick story. About 2 years ago, I was interviewing a guy named Christopher George. As a matter of fact, he's done a lot of investigations on the Queen Mary. He's out there in Long Beach. And we were talking, and right towards the end, I hear a meow. And in the middle of the conversation, one time he said something about his mom, which, by the way, was deceased. His mom loved cats, but that was way in the middle of the interview. Towards the end, I hear meow, distinctly, meow. And I'm thinking, this is his cat. Okay, we did the show. And after the show, I review all the audio. And I sent him an email. I said, hey, thanks for the interview. By the way, I heard your cat. Your cat came in. And he says, what cat? And
wow.
It was like, I don't have any cats here. I have dogs, but no cats. It was distinct meow, meow. And I was like, and by the way, I live on a very large property. that there's no cat that anyway could come in. So that's why when I heard that, that's the reason why I said, "Who is that?" Just to
Yeah.
make sure.
No, I'm glad you did. I picked them up so you could see.
So it's a live cat. It's Pumpkin making an appearance.
Yeah, Pumpkin making an appearance. He had to get in on the show.
All right. Thank you so much, Ron. It has been absolutely wonderful to speak to you, and I want to wish you the best of luck for 2019.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Thanks for saying that.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure.
You have an opening in your calendar, you let me know. I would love
Yes.
to come back.
Yes.
And we can talk about the stuff you were saying.
The dark stuff, yeah.
The dark stuff, including the jinn. I like
Yeah. Yes.
the possibility
people...
of the jinn and things that people think are angelic
Yes.
or demonic.
Yes, absolutely.
Actually being
that's pre-Judeo-Christian. There's a lot of stuff that people have misconceptions about. Yes, absolutely. Yes, we got a date. I'll be contacting you for that, okay?
Sounds good. And remind me, I'll send you the some of the evidence that I talked about. I'll send you the shadow figure from the Queen Mary. I'll send you the racist ghost spirit from Long Island, New York.
Yes, I would love to see that. I would love to hear that.
Okay.
Take care, darling.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So, guys, wasn't he great? I think he's great. Very, very interesting guest. Super interesting guest. Okay. I wasn't kidding. Ron is stuff of good paranormal investigators. He's got a level of being skeptical, but he's open-minded. He's intelligent enough to be wary of certain investigations or certain things. Like he said about that investigation where they already thought that it was an elemental or something demonic. And he's thinking, why are you going to bring in the cavalry after the fact? Believe it or not, and I've said this before, a lot of people think that because you're experienced or you just charge in there and you'll handle it. No. If you've got a heads up that you've got something along those lines and you think you might need to either bring a shaman or a psychic that is versed in handling this type of entity, you're wise to either retreat if that's what you find or not return until you have this person with you. What's the worst that could happen? Turns out, no, that's not what it was. Okay. But the flip side of that is that if it is, you're going to be very, very glad that this person is there with you. And I'm going to give you another, for instance. If you are talking an entity that's there, or more than one, but that's either non-human, malevolent, even if it's human, an elemental, whatever. They don't see, in other words, they see around the curve what's coming. And if this team goes there with the intentions of in the future bringing in possibly a person that will know how to deal with them, if you don't think that thing is going to be on the attack on that in-between visit when you're not without that person, I got news for you. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It will try to do everything it can to either attach to somebody or cause friction in the group or give nightmares. It'll try to scare them off. Everything to disrupt a follow-up visit when that person, let's say that psychic, is going to be there with you, with the team. But if you're not there, if you say, you know what, we're not going to follow up until we're able to bring this person with us, then you're going to be okay. I'm telling you, it's what's that saying? Live to fight another day. In paranormal investigations, when you're talking a very dark haunting, that is something that you are wise to handle investigations in that manner. And I'm gonna put the men out there again. Men sometimes are more confrontational, or they don't want to appear as if they're scared. And this has nothing to do with being scared or being cowardly, I guess, for some reason. It has nothing to do with it. It's just that sometimes when you're dealing with something along these lines, which is intelligent and dark, they kind of use the way humans are, or the way we think, against us. And one of those things is almost to react on an emotional basis to our disadvantage. And you would think, man, that's very manipulative. Yes, it is. And sometimes it's very subtly manipulative. So, like I said, Ron has got the makings of a great investigator. Mostly because, again, he's got that right mix of skepticism, open-mindedness. He seems like a very level-headed person. And again, it's like, I wasn't kidding when I say, some people, it's like, you can't, there's some people that you go, it's like, is there a pulse there? Because you got to have, there's going to be moments in certain investigations where you got to be on your toes. You got to be aware of things going on. But the other end of it, when you've got an overexcited personality, high strung, that's not good either for this type of work. So you want that mix of the person that is level-headed, but that when the moment determines it. And a lot of people sometimes think, oh, well, because of the supernatural aspect of investigation, you could have a lot of things go wrong in an investigation. People sometimes fall down, sometimes they get hurt. I've heard of members, especially new ones, who have had an experience and basically wig out, hyperventilate, that they have to be like basically bodily carried out. I've heard of other instances where somebody who's got, they've got either abilities as a medium that either they're aware of, or sometimes they don't even know, have been jumped by an entity, and they either go down, start talking, acting out. I've heard of people trying to run out like into again, a lot of things that can happen in an investigation are not strictly tied into dealing with a ghost. As a matter of fact, some of the most things that you got to be on your toes about are the team that you're with, or I've also heard of when the family or the people that live in the house are there as well, that sometimes things happen with them. They act out, or the entity that is affecting them wants to break up the party, does something to one of them, especially if there's an attachment going on. I mean, a whole host of things. Sometimes people don't think about this, which, by the way, ties into what me and Ron were talking about people that when you do residential investigations. I've been doing this for a really long time, and unfortunately, our society's become so litigious that you really got to think twice about going into some of these investigations, depending on what's going on there. Okay? If you've got a situation, again, mental illness, substance abuse, stuff going on, again, this does not say there's nothing supernatural going on there. As a matter of fact, more than likely there is. You still have to think about, well, how is that going to affect me, my team, the group? Because unfortunately, a lot of things can happen the way, and I'm going to give you an example. This is a hypothetical. Let's say you go into an investigation, and sometimes you do a pre-interview, and you there's certain questions that you ask, about what's going on and who's in the family, and there's certain questions that you ask, including is anybody taking drugs, things like that, legal drugs, in other words. Most people, in my experience, are honest, but sometimes you have a lot of things going on that some family members will be in ignorance of that other family member, even though they're all living under the same roof. Okay? And sometimes you go into this investigation and there's basically you're inserting yourself into a dynamic that's pretty hot. But of course, people are on their best behavior when you contact them. And you'd be surprised how sometimes people use supernatural events to kind of deflect from addressing the real problem. Okay? And sometimes when a paranormal team comes in there and inserts themselves in and says maybe what the person doesn't want to hear, one, there's no ghost, sorry, we didn't find evidence, or two, yeah, there is, but we think it's dark, and we might need to bring in maybe clergy or whatever. This is not a question of a house blessing or whatever. Some people, sometimes the way they react can be quite scary and sometimes dangerous. And once you've inserted yourself in there somehow as a team, depending on what happens, it's not a good place to be. It's not. And I mean, it could go wrong in a lot of different ways because human beings are very complex, and you'd be surprised a lot of things that go on. People blame them or deflect them on the supernatural versus saying, this is what's really happening. And let's face it, when you're a paranormal investigator, you're not a psychotherapist. You're not supposed to go in there and diagnose people or tell them, hey, you know what? I think you need to go see a psychiatrist or a psychologist, right? That's not what you're there for. And sometimes it's exactly what you find yourself in the middle of. You're like, huh? Okay. This person, there's, or as a matter of fact, you guys, if I interviewed a gentleman by the name of James Keenan, wrote some great books, and he is telling the story of many years ago. He was in his 20s, I believed. He was living out in California, and he was a police officer, a young police officer. I can't remember what department. And he says that him and his partner, they get called out to a house for domestic violence. And that this family had already like a history of domestic, in other words, that the police would be called out there because of stuff going on. And they had a bunch of children. And he apparently, he was like the junior officer, and his partner, I guess, had more experience. So he's saying how it was a 2-story house, and they bring the other officer is telling the husband, you know what, I'm tired of coming out here. The children were there on the sofa. The wife is there, and he's like I'm telling the husband, I'm sick and tired of coming out here. What's going on here? Blah. And he says that in the middle of this, all of a sudden, they hear a bunch of people talking upstairs. And, one of the things that they had told them is everybody down here, the whole family was there, and they say, is anybody else? No. And they turned to the guy, the parents, the husband and the wife, and they're like, I thought you said there was nobody else in this house. And they're like, there isn't. Okay, so who's that talking? So James was the one that is like, you're going to go upstairs and find out. And he says, from what if I remember correctly, that it was like arguing in obscene language. And it was like, and he says it wasn't like one person, it was like several people. Okay. That he went upstairs and he's thinking, who or what's up here? Like, what is, what am I? Because remember, at that moment, he's not thinking ghost, supernatural, nothing. He's thinking, man, we've been called out on a DV, and it sounds like I got a bunch of people upstairs that are arguing using obscene language. Like, what is going on? So he goes up the stairs, and he says that as soon as he gets up to the landing, it stopped. It went from loud conversation to stop. And he says even the family themselves were totally, they were wigged out. Like, in other words, they knew there was nobody. And he says, and he checked it, there was nothing or nobody up there. Okay, and he came downstairs and he says that the family themselves were like, the point being, by the way, they moved out the next week because they moved out, they left. But apparently, based on what he was told, this family was very dysfunctional. And there was a lot of chaos in the family. And like I said, the police were being called out there. And my point being, getting to as a paranormal team, let's say you were not the police officer. Let's say you're a paranormal team that comes out to an investigation like this. And you don't have the benefit of the knowledge of what's going on really, truly with the family. You're only going on what they tell you on a pre-interview or that, oh yeah. And then you get there and you find something like this. Okay. And I'm positive, based on just what that story, which I could see very easily, that a lot of it had to do with the dynamics of what was going on with that family. And, what are you going to tell these people? You know what? As long as you keep on maybe with this upheaval and dysfunction, it's going to be really difficult to throw this off. That's not what a paranormal investigator is there for. But sometimes there's what you find yourself doing, unfortunately. And getting back to what I was saying, that nowadays when you do this type of work, you have to think, like when you get to some of these places and you realize the reality of what's maybe going on there, the family dynamics. Is it like, man, I want to help you, but I don't think I can. That's when you you try to help them or refer them, whether if it's clergy, if they're open to it. And that's another thing. Sometimes you get people that are not open to the kind of help you want to tell them, even as nicely as you want to couch it, as in, do you have clergy or do you have, maybe a counselor? Do you have a family member, somebody that can... It's a kind of a real delicate kind of thing. If you even think that this client is going to be willing to listen to you, when you're trying to tell them you might or might not have something paranormal, but really what's juicing this along is what's going on between the living here. And until you address this somehow or other, this is going to continue. Or in other words, we could do a blessing on your house. Or, you might get clergy to come and do a blessing or whatever. But if this turbulence in your family continues, it's not going to really do much. And I'm going to plug my own book. As a matter of fact, now at the end of December, I brought out my last book, which is Supernatural Safety. And part of what I explained there, as far as it's basically a DIY paranormal guide to what you can do before you bring in a team. If you need to bring in a team. You don't always have to. You have to see, not all the time, because absolutely some hauntings have nothing to do with the family dynamics. The families are normal. By this, I don't mean perfect, because we're all human beings. I'm talking about deep dysfunction. How a lot of times this fuels a lot of really dark, and it's almost like the negative feelings generated by the people living there fuel the supernatural agent to grow stronger, and in turn, this turns up the heat under the humans that are there as to how they react with one another. Do they fly off the handle? Do they become suspicious? Growing discontent, division, isolation, suspiciousness. Oops, there goes my light. But anyway, and it's like a vicious circle. But how do you tell somebody, you know what? blessing your house or smudging it or whatever, it's not really going to do that if you don't do something to fix or address what's going on amongst yourselves. And what I always say, a lot of times people think that the solutions to these kind of scenarios, whether it's supernatural or not, or whether we're talking something within a family or a marriage or whatever, a family, it's like, hey, instant gratification, it's done. No, it's not. It's a process. It's a process. But at some point, if people start going in that direction, okay, maybe understanding, you know what, I'm not communicating with this other person, or I'm being suspicious, that's might even be the effect of the supernatural agent, which is when people stop communicating with each other, isolating or dysfunctional behavior. Like, where does one end and the other one start? If people start looking at it from an observer point of view of, I'm being manipulated, and how do I stop it? And thinking, I have to go get help from this somehow. Okay, which there's a lot of different avenues depending on who's involved, what your belief system is. But actually thinking of doing something, these are the different levels of what's involved with paranormal research and investigations that you never really see that much of. No, not much of. You don't see when you get into the paranormal reality shows. But it does exist. It does exist. And of course, like I said, a lot of the shows, either people are told, families are told, oh, it's not malevolent, don't worry about it. Or, oh, we brought somebody and they blessed the house. And, sometimes there's a lot more going on behind the scenes. And that's why you have a lot of people that they'll have a team come in, or even clergy, and they don't realize that they still got to keep working at it. Like he was saying, like he pointed out that he was smudging even though he was waiting for the shaman to come. This is part of the DIY. You work at it. You pray, whatever it is that your belief system is. You pray, you smudge, you laugh, you put on happy music, you go outside, you refuse to give in to despair, you don't let yourself be isolated. All these things is part of a continuous ongoing process whenever you find yourself in some type of scenario where there's a dark haunting, especially. And like I said, it's a multi-layered thing, because let's face it, human beings are complex. We're very simple in some things and complex in others. And when you're talking, even a discarnate human entity, they're so complicated and complex. Same thing goes on. But anyway, guys, I hope you liked the show. Even though I know you're not going to see it for a little bit. Again, I want to wish everybody a happy 2019. Don't forget, if you want to see links to the shows, whether it's the video or the podcast, you can go to miamighostchronicles.com. There's links there. Also, if you want to send me your true story, go to the Submit Your Story tab. Also, there's links for the latest book, which is Supernatural Safety. You can buy it on my site or at Amazon. Probably have it at some other places eventually. I'm planning another couple of books for this year. Again, I've got a lot of wonderful guests that are scheduled to come on, whether it's paranormal investigators, authors. Again, I am trying to bring in more diverse subjects, and I talked about it the last time, which is not only as far as the paranormal or cryptids, maybe some other people, ufologists, conspiracy theories. I mean, we have a lot of things going on. 2019 is going to be a wonderful year, and I hope all of you have a very lucky and wonderful year before you. Take care, and thanks for being part of my audience.